Howland knelt before the weirwood and prayed to the old gods. The vision he'd gotten had been clear, and he wondered why the gods had decided to speak to him now. As a younger man, he'd traveled to the Isle of Faces and spent some time among the weirwoods that grew there. The feeling of closeness with the old gods was intensified, and Howland could feel the magic on the isle. He had been plagued by visions and strange dreams since he was a child, but they were all too hard to comprehend, and it wasn't until the events had already occurred that their true meaning had become clear. By then, though it was too late. Had he been given a vision as clear as this one, then maybe he could have saved her. Maybe things would have turned out different. After the rebellion, his wounds had been severe and Howland had retreated back to the Greywater Watch. The visions had subsided, although the more he now thought on it, the more sure he was that they really hadn't, and he'd instead ignored them. A few moons ago, though, they had returned, and these he could not ignore. He had failed the mother. He would not fail the son, so he had sent Jagen to see how Jaehaerys was doing. He needed to make sure the boy was safe and happy. Jagen, I hear there is a tourney in Lannisport. I would like you to go. Trey. A tourney, my lord, why? There's someone there I wish you to see for me. Someone I want to know more about. Will you do this for me? Of course, my lord. So his friend's son had gone to participate in a tourney, and Howland eagerly awaited his return. He needed to be sure that her boy was safe. It was the least he could do for the woman who had meant so much to him. Howland had been furious with his friend when he told him his plan for Lyanna's son. While it protected his life, he knew it could damage the boy's sense of self, and after meeting his new liege lady, he had known he was right. He had argued with Ned, offered to raise Jaehaerys in his home, and to give the boy his name if he wanted it. But Ned had refused, and the rift between the two men had barely been breached since. When he heard how the boy had been raised, how he was treated, he had considered stealing the boy away himself, but Gianna had talked him out of it, telling him rightly that such a thing could damage the child irreparably. When he had heard that Jaehaerys was squiring for Jaime Lannister, he didn't know what to think. But the images of his vision began to make sense. A wolf cub standing in the shadow of a lion, both fiercely growling at something unseen before, as one they attacked, the two then walking away side by side. Howland had understood the sigils and the significance of them, of course, but the context was something beyond him, until he had heard the news. So, he had accepted that this was a good thing, and the visions had gone away for a time. When they returned, though he couldn't make sense of them at all, it was images that lasted a split second, and there were so many that when he woke he could barely remember them. It had plagued his thoughts and had been the main reason he had sent Jagen to check on the boy, worried that perhaps he had been wrong about Jaime's intentions. Father, Howland turned to see his wife swinging his son's hand, making the boy laugh. His daughter Mira beside them trying to do the same with Jojen's other hand. My love, my children, Howland said as he got up from his knees and kissed Gianna and then each of his children on the forehead. Howland, my love, it's time to eat. Harkin and Carl have arrived also, Janna said, and Howland smiled at her. Very well. Come, children, Howland said, and the four of them made their way back to the keep. After dinner, Howland sat with Harkin and Carl in the great hall. The two men were amongst the hardiest of the Cranningmen, fierce fighters with their spears and both excellent bowmen. The two men were the second sons of House Blackmire and Boggs respectively, and both of them had earned Howland's trust over the years. Harkin, Carl, I have a job for both of you, Howland said softly while the two men sat drinking the warm cider his wife was famous for making. Howland said softly, anything you need, my lord. Carl and me are glad to do it. Ain't that right, Carl? Harkin said quickly while Carl just nodded. I need you to deliver some letters for me. One to Lord Wyman and the other to Benjen Stark at the Wall, Howland said, noticing the frown on Carl's face while Harkin kept his expression much more schooled. I know it's a lot to ask, and I wish it could be left to a raven, but I need to know the letters were placed in the hands of both men by people I can trust. Of course, my lord. Harkin replied, "Good men, I've arranged travel for you in White Harbor. Lord Manderley is sending some supplies to the Night's Watch, so his men will accompany you to Eastwatch, and then Castle Black. Once you're there, hand the letter to Benjen Stark, no one else. Do you understand?" "Aye, we get it, my lord." "Very well. Once you've given him the letter you're to wait, Benjen will give you something which you will bring with you and hand to Lord Wyman personally. The Manderley men will be instructed to wait along with you, and once you've received the item from Benjen, you can leave and make your way back to Eastwatch." "What is it we're collecting, my lord?" Charles asked inquisitively. "We!" "You'll know when Benjen hands it to you," Howland said, leaving no room for further discussion. When both men nodded in acceptance, Howland reached behind himself and grabbed a small pouch filled with coins and handed them to Harkin. "There's no need, my lord," Harkin said, a little put out by the gesture. "I know, lads, but accept it anyway. I'll not have you out of pocket on this," Howland said as Harkin and Carl reluctantly accepted the coin. Jaime ran as fast as he could, cradling John in his arms and allowing nothing or no one to slow him down. He had ran up the steps leading to Kralen's rooms and practically kicked the door open. The maester had been so stunned that he dropped the bottle he'd been holding in his hand and shrieked in a very unmanly way. "My lord," Kralen said shakily, "you need to help him. You must help him," Jaime pleaded as he laid John down on the small bed, wiping the blood that dripped from his nose. "What happened?" Kralen asked as he began to examine John. I don't know. We were breaking our fast and he got up and then fell. When I got to him, he was out cold and had blood dripping from his nose. I don't know, maester. I don't know," Jaime said, his voice almost breaking. He watched as Kralen undid John's tunic and took it and his undershirt off before Kralen leant into John's chest and listened to his breathing. The maester wiped the blood of John's nose and took a small piece of the cloth he used and carried it, the tunic and the undershirt, to a table at the back of the room. Jaime stood there and watched as John took slow breaths before the boy began to shake and convulse in some kind of fit. "Maester, quick," he shouted. Kralen rushed over and held John down. Thankfully, after a few minutes, John seemed to settle. But almost as soon as he did, the convulsions started again. "My lord, you needs must turn him over on his side and hold him. I'll be back in a moment," Kralen said as he got up. "What? You can't leave," Jaime angrily said as he held John while the boy shook violently. "I'm not, my lord. I needs must make the boy purge himself. He has to empty his stomach," Kralen said, while Jaime nodded in understanding. The maester was incredibly quick, although Jaime gulped at what he held in his hand. The large piece of metal was almost a foot long and a couple of inches thick. It was curved at the end, and when he saw it, he knew that it would soon be going into John's mouth to force him to empty his stomach. He held on to John as the maester began pushing the metal into his mouth. Within seconds, John began to shake again, and Jaime looked at the maester, who just shook his head and continued to force the metal down the boy's throat. Finally, after what felt like an age, Kralen quickly removed the metal, and he felt John heave as his stomach emptied. The maester looked on with something like relief in his features and asked Jaime to wipe the mess from the boy, while he once again went to the back of the room. Jaime cleaned John as best he could and sat there on the bed holding the boy in his arms. After a few moments, Tyrion arrived, followed closely by Gerion. Joy apparently in the care of one of the new servants Gerion and John had approved of. "How is he?" Gerion asked, the concern clear in his face. I don't know," Jaime said, before they could ask any more questions. Kralen returned, carrying a small glass with the same metal object as before, and looked at Jaime and the others. "My lord, I need you to hold the boy while I have him swallow this. He needs to be held steady. My lord, you must be firm," Kralen said, and Jaime nodded determinedly. "Raise the boy up, my lord, so he's sitting." Jaime did as he was told, and Kralen nodded at him before signaling for him to hold John tightly while he poured the liquid into his mouth. He watched as Kralin used the metal to force Jon to keep his mouth open and slowly poured the liquid in. He then quickly took the metal out and washed and waited before nodding, obviously satisfied. Good. The boy has a chance now, Kralin said and walked away with the empty glass and the metal. Jaime carefully laid Jon down, the peaceful look on the boy's face almost making him forget why they were here. He turned to see both Gerion and Tyrion were looking on with concern. He got up and went to find the small sheet that covered Jon's still naked chest, finding one that seemed suitable. He wrapped it around him and waited for Kralin to come back. The three men all sat silently, each lost in their own thoughts. Kralin returned and carried a glass jug with yellow water and a piece of cloth inside. He also carried Jon's tunic, which he'd cut a section from, and a piece of cloth. In his other hand, he had another glass filled with what looked like water. He nodded to Jaime and motioned for him and the others to follow him to the small table in the corner. When they did, he finally began to speak and confirmed Jaime's worst fears. Jon had been poisoned. It's wolfsbane, my lord, a strong and unfortunately an extremely potent poison, Kralin said. Dah! What? Who the hell would want to poison Jon? Gerion said angrily and began to pace around the room. I don't know, Lord Gerion. I only know he's been poisoned, Kralin said, not easing Gerion's agitation whatsoever. How can you be sure, Maester? Maester, Tyrion asked. There is no other explanation, my lord. The boy's been poisoned. I'm certain of it, Kralin said, a little put out that his competence was being questioned. No, Maester, you misunderstand. I'm not questioning the poisoning. What I was asking was, how can you be sure it's wolfsbane? Tyrion asked. Oh, I'm sorry, my lord, Kralin said apologetically. But Tyrion just waved him on. When Lord Jaime brought the boy, Kralin began. His name is Jane, Gerion shouted at the Maester.
I'm sorry, my lord. When Lord Jaime brought Jon in and I removed his tunic, I noticed a smell.
A sweet smell like fresh flowers, Kralin said as he handed the cut of piece of tunic to Jaime so he could smell it, which he did before handing it to Tyrion. The Maester was right. Jaime didn't understand the relevance. I doubt that Jon bathes in rosewater, my lords, Kralin said with a smile that no one returned. So given that, and given that Jon had been breaking his fast, I suspected poison and that it may be wolfsbane given the smell and the condition of Jon, so I tested it. The test itself being quite easy, just a simple matter of using the right items and adding a piece of the poison and the water would turn a yellowish color. Kralin took the piece of tunic from Tyrion and dropped it into the small glass, all of them looking on as the liquid began to turn yellow. So that drink you gave him, that was the antidote, right? Jon will be fine now, won't he? Gerion asked concernedly. It's not that certain, I'm afraid, my lords. We managed to purge the poison, and Jon hasn't expelled the antidote, which are both good things. But I'm worried, my lords, that his age may work against him. We have to prepare for the worst. Kralin replied. Are you saying he may die, Maester? Tyrion asked worriedly. I'm saying that it's likely he will, my lord, Kralin said before Jaime grabbed him by the chain and forced him against the wall. He won't die. You'll save him. You'll damn well save him, or I'll have your head mounted on the wall. You hear me? Jaime shouted at the stricken Maester. Jaime, Tyrion said as he and Gerion attempted to pull him from the Maester. Finally, after a few minutes where the Maester looked like he'd pass out from the pressure Jaime was putting on this chain, Jaime released him and walked to the bed. He pulled a chair and sat down, his head in his hands as he looked down on Jon. Tyrion sat in Jaime's solar and awaited the arrival of his Uncle Kevin and Aunt Jenna, both eager, no doubt, to say their piece. It had been 2 days since Jon collapsed, and the boy was still unconscious. And in those 2 days, his brother had refused to leave his bedside. Jaime had barely ate, drank, or slept since they'd been told that Jon may not wake up, and Tyrion was worried how his brother would handle it if Jon didn't survive. Yesterday, he and Gerion had decided that Tyrion would take over the Lord's duties, which even though Jaime had only been neglecting them for a day, had piled up. And so Tyrion had spent the entire day and night sending missives, organizing taxes, and assigning duties. He had just finished when the servant came in saying his aunt and uncle wanted a meeting, and now as he sat there, he could feel his head begin to pound. He had sent the servant to escort them in, and had just swallowed a quick glass of wine when they entered. What's the meaning of this? Where's Jaime? Kevin angrily said, not even bothering to sit down before starting. Jaime is busy. Now, please take a seat. Uncle and Jenna, if you would. He watched as they both sat down, the angry scowl on Kevin's face apparent, while his aunt, as always, was much more circumspect. He poured each of them a glass of wine and refilled his own glass and sighed before turning to speak to them. Now, Uncle, what seems to be the problem? Where is Jaime? Why isn't he here? Kevin almost shouted at him. As I told you, Uncle, Jaime is busy. Now what do you need? Busy with what, Tyrion? His aunt asked softly. Personal matters, Aunt. What personal matters? Jenna's voice a little more insistent now. His squire was poisoned, and Jaime's trying to get to the bottom of why. Now again, what is the problem that so urgently got you absolutely needing to see Jaime right now? Tyrion said, his voice hard. You're telling me that he's with the bastard, rather than meet for our weekly meeting. Kevin said indignantly, no use. Tyrion said angrily, shocking them both. Weekly meeting, you're here causing all this fuss over a meeting of no import. A meeting you have every week. A meeting that can damn well wait. Tyrion said, his voice rising with each word. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Kevin shouted back. Who am I? I'm the heir to Casterly Rock, Uncle. Or haven't you yet figured out that Jaime is not like father? Oh, that much is clear, Kevin snorted. Which you should be thankful for. Which you should be thankful for. Tyrion said, smirking, knowing that had his father still been alive, that Kevin would have remained a lackey rather than been in charge of something as important as Lannisport. Now, as I said, if there's nothing important to discuss, you can bring this up at your next weekly meeting. He added, smiling now at the look his uncle was giving him. Kevin jumped up, and for a second Tyrion thought that perhaps he may strike him. Instead, though he turned and stormed out the door, leaving Tyrion alone with his aunt. Was that necessary? Jenna said resignedly, You saw him. He came in here looking for an argument, he replied. Kevin's not handled the loss of our brother. Well, you know that Tyrion, yet you and Jaime provoke him. Provoke him? How are we provoking him? Tyrion asked, genuinely curious. The bastard. The bastard. What about Jon? That's what provokes him. How friendly you are with the bastard. All of you. But especially Jaime. He's a bastard. Tyrion. Yet you all treat him like he's a true-born son. Kevin may be open about it, but others have spoken of it. Not only is he a lord's bastard, and as you saw with the duels, or should I say would have seen if you'd bothered to turn up, he's an accomplished swordsman, Aunt. I didn't turn up because you gave a bastard my old room. Jenna said, annoyance clear in her face. Tyrion laughed. He actually almost fell over. He laughed that hard. All of this, all his aunt's pique was over the damn room she had when she was a girl, a room she hadn't spent any time in for years. Jenna had moved from Casterly Rock into Kevin's residence not long after Jon arrived, and both he and Gerion had put it down to them, helping each other get over the loss of their brother, when in fact it was the loss of a damn room. My dear sweet aunt, he got that room because it was the only free room available on the family wing. It had nothing to do with it being yours. I swear Jaime wouldn't know who stayed in what room apart from his, mine, and Cersei's. But why does he need to stay in the family wing at all? Tyrion, he's a bastard, she asked. Who happens to be the Lord's squire, Aunt? Tyrion said before adding, Have you even bothered to speak to the lad, spend any time with him? Of course not. Jon, so you haven't seen him with Joy. He spends time with Joy? His aunt said in a surprised tone. Spends time with Aunt. The boy is basically her guardian at this point, he reads to her. Takes her out around the castle, spends his free time playing with her. You should see them together, she's like a different girl. Tyrion said with a small smile on his face. So that's why Gerion likes him so much. Jenna smiled back at him. Aye, Aunt, it is. That and the boy himself. There's something about him which makes you like him. I can't explain it, but when he's around, it's just better, he said as Jenna nodded. How bad is it, Tyrion? It's bad, Aunt. He may not recover. Then I shall say a prayer to the mother for him, she said as she stood up. You can tell the servants to make up my former quarters. I shall be moving back in the next couple of days. Tyrion watched as his aunt left the room. It was good she would be returning. He had missed his aunt, and with her back here, Kevin would be less of a problem. He finished the wine in his glass and walked out of the room. He was tired, but instead of heading for his room for a quick nap, he walked to the maester's chambers. Gerion played with his daughter as he'd done for most of the morning, but neither his nor Joy's heart was really into it. Mostly, he had been going through the motions and trying to keep his and Joy's mind off Jon, and unfortunately for both of them, failing miserably. Ever since his collapse, Joy had asked after Jon almost constantly. When he told her that Jon would be down soon, he had felt like the worst liar in the world, and the longer it took for him to awaken, the more Gerion worried he would not. Want Jon, Papa? Joy said sadly, looking up at him. Jon's sleeping, princess. He'll be here when he wakes up. No sleep? No, nah, Joy said, shaking her head. Do you want to come see the horsies, princess? No, yawn. Let's go see the horsies. Then maybe Jon will be awake. Ok, Papa. Horsies yawn. He picked his daughter up and brought her to the stables. Luckily, once she was around the horses, she forgot about Jon for a while, and he was happy for the respite. Although for himself, it wasn't that easy. When he had changed Joy's clothing, after she spilled the cup, he had walked back towards the hall, only to find everyone rushing around, asking what had happened. He had been shocked. He had Alessia take Joy and had rushed to Craylan's, meeting Tyrion on the way. Seeing the boy laying there, Gerion had felt more scared than he could ever remember. The boy was always pale, but as he looked at him, he had practically no color in his face whatsoever. When Craylan had explained he'd been poisoned, Gerion had been furious. Whoever it was, whoever did this, he'd find them, and when he did, God help them, he'd make them suffer. When it had been explained what poison had been used, and that it had most likely been used in a drink, he'd almost keeled over. Jon had stopped her from drinking it? Did he know something was off with the drink? And was that why he wouldn't give her some? He knew when it came to his daughter, Jon was generous, with not just his time and affections, but with giving her things she wanted. Nothing that would hurt her, of course, but he'd share things with her. And his daughter knew it and took advantage of it. But when he refused her the cup, it had seemed strange. He'd seen Jon allow her little sips from his cup before, but he had thought nothing of it at the time. Now, though, the more he pictured it in his head, how Jon had been a little off, how his face had been, he couldn't help but think the boy knew there was something not right with the drink and had kept it away from his daughter. In doing so, he had probably saved her life. Horsey, Papa, horsey, pretty. His daughter's voice took him from his thoughts. Yes, princess. She is a pretty horsey. Do you want to pet the horsey? Joy. He watched as Joy smile while her hand rubbed the horse's neck, and he sighed. He had never brought her out to see the horses before. Jon arrived, he'd barely ever brought her out of the castle itself. The boy had changed his and his daughter's life from the moment he'd arrived, and the thought that someone had deliberately hurt him made Gerion angrier than he'd ever been. Sleepy Papa, Joy said, and he smiled. He hugged the little girl tightly before they made their way back to her room, feeling her breathing slow. Down, he held her softly against his chest. When he made it to their rooms, he placed her carefully in her bed and kissed her on her forehead before making his way to the door as quietly as he could. He smiled at Alessia as he left, and made his way up to the maester's rooms, hoping that when he got there, he'd receive better news. Jaime was not a man who prayed often. He could barely remember the last time he'd even set foot in the sept that was of his own choice. But today he had come and prayed to each of the 7. He lit candles, and as he stood before the statues, he resisted the urge to scream and shout, to rant and rave at the injustices that these so-called gods allowed to happen. Jon was innocent, a boy who'd never harmed anyone, and yet these gods had seen fit to allow his sister to poison him. Oh, he knew it was her. Ever since she'd smirked at him, he'd known she would do something. But this he could never imagine. Poisoning a boy just to get back at him. She was just like their father, a monster. Lord Jaime, Septon Artist said as he moved towards him. Septon, Jaime said gruffly. It's not often we see you here, my lord. No, it's not. I'm very busy. Of course, my lord. As was your lord father, we of the faith understand such things. Artist said, and Jaime just wished he'd go away. Septon Artist was the latest in a line of annoying Septons Jaime had met and hated dealing with, although the man himself wasn't the worst, nor the ugliest, that honor resting with the High Septon himself. But like the rest, the air of sanctimony around him was something Jaime didn't care for, and knowing why Jaime was here and what the sanctimonious man would say about it, he got up to leave, lest he do something to the man. If you'll forgive me, Septon, I needs must get back to my work. Of course, my lord. I hope to see you here again soon, the man said, his face making it clear. He felt put out by Jaime's reticence to stay. Jaime, though, didn't care what the man thought. While he held little faith in the gods, he held none whatsoever in their so-called representatives. Having seen at firsthand what these so-called pious men actually got up to, he made his way out of the sept only to see Jors run towards him. Jaime felt his chest constrict, his heart threatening to burst from it.
My lord, my lord.
Jors. The smaller of the 2 guards he'd assigned to Jon shouted, Lord Gerion sent me, my lord. It's Jon he's awakened, Jors said, and Jaime let out the breath he'd been holding, not even waiting for the other man. Jaime set off running towards the lift. It had already begun its ascent when he realized he'd left the guard behind in his eagerness. When it reached the family's floor, he immediately made his way to the stairs and ran up them to the maester's chambers, the 2 guards standing outside quickly moving to allow him enter. When he did, he was relieved to see Jon sitting up while Crelin examined him. His uncle and brother were standing and sitting respectively, and he made his way to the bed as Jon noticed he had arrived. He waited until the maester was finished before he made his way to the bed and looked down as Jon leaned back against the pillows. He turned to the maester and gave him a questioning look. I've examined him, my lord. All seems well. He'll need some rest, of course, but I think he'll be fine, Crelin said, and Jaime could hear that he wasn't the only one in the room who breathed out in relief. How do you feel, Jon? He asked, the worry clear in his voice. I'm fine, I think. My throat feels dry, Jon answered, his voice gruff and choked from the examinations and throwing up. Here, Jon, drink this, Gerion said, handing him a cup of water. Jon drank the water eagerly and asked for another, which Gerion quickly gave him. This one, he took a little more time over, and Jaime was happy to see the color was starting to come back to his face. What do you remember, Jon? Jon, Tyrion asked. We were breaking our fast. I was drinking. It tasted awful. Really bad joy. Joy was there. She wanted to drink it, but I wouldn't let her, and then I felt strange. I don't know. Try. What breaking our fast? I wouldn't let her, and then we think you had some milk that was off Jon, and it made you very sick, Gerion said. Sticking to the story they'd decided on, now was not the time to tell him he'd been poisoned by a crazy, spiteful woman. Wait, Joy, is she all right? Jon asked worriedly. Aye, she's fine, lad. He stopped her from drinking the milk, Gerion said, and Jaime could see the pride in his uncle's eyes as he said it. Jon, Why don't you get some rest here tonight, and we'll have you move back to your room tomorrow. I'm sure when you're up to it, Gerion will bring joy to see you. She's been missing you, as have we all." Jaime said and smiled at Jon as he nodded. The three of them and the maester left the room, leaving Jon on his own. When they got outside, Jaime saw that Jorah had arrived with Ellirs, and both men relieved the two guards at the door, feeling they deserved to know how Jon was. He motioned to the maester, Gerion, and Tyrion to wait, and allowed Crelin inform them all of how Jon really was. "Well, maester," Jaime asked. "The lad's fine, my lord. He'll make a full recovery, as I said. There doesn't seem to be any lasting damage. It seems we made it in time. He's a much stronger lad. A few days bed rest and he'll be back as fit and healthy as he was before," Crelin said before heading back to his room. "Thank the Seven," Jaime heard Ellirs say. Jaime turned and walked to the two guards. "You two are now fully in charge of who comes and goes into Jon's room. He's to have no meals except those brought by either Jerrig or Maris. Is that understood? No meals and no drinks unless it's brought by those two." "Of course, my lord," Ellirs said. "Da! Starting tomorrow, I want one of you with him at all times, until I tell you different. I'll be appointing 2 new guards so you can split your time, even when he's in his room. I want 2 guards outside his door from now on. Is that clear?" Jaime looked at the 2 men, who nodded. "It is, my lord. We understand. You can count on us," Jorah said. "I know that. Thank you both," Jaime said, and gave them a small smile before walking away with his uncle and brother, Tyrion. The 3 of them walked to Jaime's solar. Tyrion had never seen his brother like that. He had basically made Jon more protected than anyone else in Casterly Rock, himself included. Tyrion understood, though. The thoughts of how close Jon had come to dying were clearly bearing down on his brother, as they had on both him and his uncle. They entered the solar and sat down while Jaime looked at them silently. Tyrion reached over and poured himself and Gerion a glass of wine as he went to pour Jaime one, though his brother shook his head and instead picked up the water jug and poured himself a cup of that before swallowing it down in one gulp. "From now on, all our meals are to be prepared by only the cooks who've been here for years. No new cooks or maids are to be anywhere close to the family's meals, either in preparing them or serving them." "Tyrion," Jaime asked. "Of course, brother. I'll need to rearrange some of the staff, but yes, I'll make it happen. We need to find out how the hell this happened. I doubt one of the servants who've been here for a long time would do this, but I can't be sure. We have to know who it was who actually put the poison in Jon's cup, Tyrion. You're going to have to question anyone who had access." "I already did, brother. One of the servants has disappeared. A young girl who had only recently started. I've sent guards looking for her, but she's gone." "Fine. She was probably the one who actually poisoned Jon. But I need to know we can trust the rest. Tyrion, you know who we can trust. Use them to see if there are any we should be worried about." "I will," Tyrion said determinedly. "Good, uncle. When Jon's up and about, I need you to go to King's Landing," Jaime said, confusing Tyrion. "Yemi," "Why?" Gerion asked. Gerion asked, "I need you to speak to Cersei, to warn her what will happen if she tries this again." Tyrion was stunned. Was he hearing this right? Was Jaime actually saying their sister had poisoned Jon? Why, what possible motive would she have? "Cersei, are you sure?" he asked. I'm sure, Tyrion. Did you not think that little performance she gave when she was leaving was strange? Suddenly talking to Jon and being nice, after having tried to get him thrown from the hall and trying to stop the king rewarding him. Suddenly she had no problem with the bastard boy and was wishing Jon well. Does that sound like our sister? "No, but that doesn't mean," Tyrion began to say before Jaime cut him off. "I know she did it, the way she smirked at me. I knew she was planning something. I just didn't think it was this." "But why?" Gerion asked. "Gerion asked to get back at me for rejecting her," Jaime said before sighing. "The night they arrived, she tried to seduce me," Jaime added while Tyrion and Gerion sat there with their mouths open. Tyrion had always known that Cersei and Jaime had been close, but they had never, as far as he knew, had they. When I threw her out of the room, she threatened me. I threatened her back and hoped that it'd be the end of it. But I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. She was always going to try and get back at me. I just never imagined she'd use Jon to do so. What you want me to do? Gerion asked. When you get to King's Landing, I want you to warn her that if she tries something like this again, Robert will find out the truth. Jaime, you can't tell the king his wife tried to seduce you. What if he didn't believe you, or worse, blamed you? Tyrion said. No, the truth about who Joffrey's father is. You can't mean? Tyrion asked. Take it, Jaime said, and Tyrion and Gerion gasped. How do you know? Because she made me guard the door while she fucked our uncle. Jaime said, the disgust clear in his voice. Gerion broke out laughing, forcing Tyrion and Jaime to look at him. He didn't stop, just continued laughing for a few minutes before finally turning to look at them both. So her son's a bastard, Gerion said before laughing again. Yes, and if Robert found out, he would take both their heads. Jaime said. Tyrion shook his head. Was Jaime seriously suggesting that they tell the king it'd mean war? Sure, his sister was a bitch, but while the boy was a bit off, he was still a child. You don't approve, Jaime said, looking at him. She's our sister and the child's our nephew. You can't, Jaime. I'm not and I won't, but this is the only way to keep Jon safe. When she finds out he's alive, Tyrion, she'll try again, and no matter how many guards or how many changes we make, he won't be safe. This way she'll know what happens and it'll stop her. So it's a warning then, for now, Jaime said, and Tyrion shuddered.